Every Halloween, one small-town crosswalk turns into a death trap. Drivers crash without reason, claiming they saw someone. But there's never a body, just shattered glass and silence. The locals say it's haunted by a man who was hit by a car and left to die, alone, on that very street. But the chilling truth? He's still waiting for the driver to return. And this year, someone unexpected steps onto the road. What if your dad wasn't the man you thought he was? And what if the ghost haunting your town was coming for him? Some urban legends fade with time. Others get louder. In the town of Ashbrook, there's one tale nobody dares to laugh at. The Dead Man's Crosswalk. Every Halloween at midnight, the same thing happens. Cars crash at the exact same spot. Survivors say they swerved to miss someone. But when emergency crews arrive, there's no one there. No footprints. No blood. Just the sound of rain and a cold wind that carries whispers. 17-year-old Chloe Winters has always been obsessed with ghost stories, but this one feels different, personal. Her best friend Jamie says it's just another made-up myth to scare kids, but Chloe feels the truth in her bones. And when she digs deeper into the legend of Thomas Wheeler, a man who died at that crosswalk decades ago in an unsolved hit-and-run, she starts connecting dots that no one else ever dared to. Then Chloe sees the ghost herself, pale, hollow-eyed, standing under the flickering streetlight. That's when the truth hits harder than any legend ever could. Her loving father might have been the one behind the wheel that night, and the ghost has been waiting for him ever since. This is a story about secrets, revenge, and how the past never really stays buried. Story number 1. Emily Crow had always been the skeptical type, the girl who didn't believe in ghost stories or curses, who rolled her eyes whenever someone mentioned paranormal activity. College was supposed to be her fresh start. Away from the small town that suffocated her. Away from the rumors that followed her like a shadow. Room 313 in Keating Hall was just a room, just a place to sleep, eat, and study. Nothing more. At least, that's what she told herself as she moved into the cramped dorm room on the 3rd floor. She'd heard the stories, of course. The rumors that clung to the place like dust to old furniture. Students said the room was cursed, haunted, by the restless spirit of a girl who vanished without a trace decades ago. It didn't help that the mirror in the room was said to show the reflection of that very girl, if you stared at it long enough. But Emily wasn't the type to be spooked by silly tales. She laughed it off, brushing aside the warnings from the upperclassmen who'd moved out of room 313 in a hurry. She didn't have time for folklore. She had exams to prepare for, books to read, and a future to think about. The first few nights in the room were uneventful. The mirror in the corner, large, antique, and framed in chipped gold, was simply a mirror. It reflected her tired face as she unpacked her things, nothing more. But then, late one night, something happened. It was around 3:13 a.m., the witching hour, when Emily woke up to a cold draft brushing against her skin. Her blanket had been kicked off during the night and the room felt off. She glanced at the mirror. Her reflection was the same as always. Her dark hair a little mussed, her pale face barely illuminated by the light from the street lamp outside. But something was wrong. The reflection in the mirror wasn't entirely her. There was a flicker, a faint shadow that moved just behind her. It wasn't her own. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she turned to look over her shoulder, but the room was empty. When she faced the mirror again, it was gone, only her reflection staring back at her. She shook her head, chalking it up to sleep deprivation. But that night, sleep didn't come easily. Her eyes kept flicking to the mirror, expecting something to move. but nothing did. The next day, Emily mentioned it to Jake Holloway, her roommate. Jake, a good-natured guy with a dry sense of humor, just chuckled. "You believe in that old ghost story?" he asked. "Look, the mirror is probably just warped from age. Old glass does weird things to reflections. Don't get too worked up about it." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She spent the next few nights keeping a close eye on the mirror, watching for any odd movements, any signs of something or someone else. And then it happened again. But this time, it was worse. At precisely 3:13 a.m., Emily awoke to the unmistakable sound of whispering. Soft, indistinct voices that seemed to come from the mirror itself. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, pleading, desperate. When she looked into the glass, her reflection wasn't hers anymore. Instead, it was a girl. A girl with pale skin and hollow eyes, wearing the same worn-out clothes that Emily herself had been wearing earlier in the day. The girl's lips were moving, but no sound came from her. She looked trapped. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as she backed away, but the girl in the mirror didn't disappear. She only stared back, her eyes wide with terror. "Jake!" Emily screamed, turning toward the other side of the room. But when she looked, Jake was gone. His bed was empty, the sheets tangled as if he had vanished into thin air. Panic rose in her chest as she turned back to the mirror. The girl was still there. But this time, Emily noticed something even stranger. The girl's reflection was aging, fast. Her hair went from dark to gray, her face hollowing out as though years of trauma were being sucked from her soul. And then, just like that, the girl reached out, her hand touching the surface of the glass. Emily gasped, and before she could pull away, her reflection did the same. Her own hand pressed against the mirror as if pulled by some unseen force. It was cold, so cold. And then, just as the clock struck 3:14, everything stopped. The mirror went still. Emily's hand fell away, but the girl's reflection remained locked in place, her empty eyes staring into the depths of Emily's soul. She wasn't alone. In the days that followed, Emily's world started to fall apart. She couldn't remember if she was awake or asleep. Her reflection no longer matched her movements. She would wake up in different parts of the room, clothes wrong, hair out of place, as though something, or someone, was moving her in her sleep. Her connection to the real world began to fray. That's when she visited Professor Lang, the university's paranormal folklore expert. The old man had a reputation for knowing more about the dark things in the world than anyone cared to admit. When Emily told him about the mirror, his face turned pale, his eyes darting nervously. "The curse of room 313, he muttered. "The mirror is not just a reflection. It's a prison for souls. It traps anyone who gazes into it during 3:13 a.m., feeding off their fear, their trauma. But that doesn't explain Jake, or me," Emily insisted. Lang hesitated before speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've already been taken. The mirror feeds on unresolved pain, on loneliness. It traps those who stare too long, and they become part of its endless loop. Jake didn't believe, and so he vanished. But you," he paused, "you were already broken. The mirror could sense it." Emily's stomach twisted. She thought back to the nightmares she'd had as a child, her parents' arguments, the loneliness she had always felt, her struggle to fit in, her endless search for something real. It was all there, lingering just below the surface, waiting to be consumed. "Get out of there," Lang urged, "before it's too late." but Emily didn't listen. There was nowhere to go. She had already crossed over. The room, the mirror, had become her prison. That night, as 3:13 a.m. came around again, Emily stood in front of the mirror. The girl was there, reaching out. Emily's hand moved to meet her reflection. This time, when the girl's hand touched hers, it was Emily who faded. She was no longer in the room. She was inside the mirror now, trapped in its cold, glassy depths. Her soul was bound to the cursed reflection. Her body just another shadow in the frame. A few days later, a new student moved into room 313. Her name was Lisa, and she had heard the stories about the cursed mirror. But she didn't believe in ghosts. As she unpacked, her eyes wandered to the mirror. There, in the glass, her own reflection smiled at her. But just behind her, something flickered. Something that wasn't quite right. And then, the whispers began. Story number 2. Liam Blackwood wasn't the kind of man who was easily scared. He'd spent years surviving in the wilderness, hiking, camping, climbing. Every corner of nature felt like home to him. But even he couldn't ignore the rumors that swirled around Blackwood Forest. The place had a reputation, and it wasn't a good one. Whispers of an eerie, never-ending whistle that echoed through the trees, luring people into the depths of the forest, never to return. But Liam didn't believe in ghost stories, and he figured that if anyone could handle whatever was out there, it was him. He wasn't alone. Ava Monroe, his best friend, joined him for the weekend hike. Ava had a knack for skepticism, always quick to dismiss any superstitions or local myths. She was practical, grounded, and to Liam, that made her the perfect hiking partner. Mason Reed, however, wasn't as confident. He was nervous, always second-guessing every step, every sound. But Liam had agreed to bring him along, thinking it might help Mason face his fears. The three of them entered the forest on a crisp fall morning, the sun just starting to push through the trees. The air smelled of earth and pine, a familiar scent that Liam breathed in deeply. The woods were dense, the trees tall and twisted, their branches like crooked fingers reaching toward the sky. It wasn't long before they heard it, a soft, distant whistle. It was faint at first, so quiet that they might have missed it if they weren't paying attention. But Liam wasn't just paying attention. He was listening for it. The whistle sounded strange, almost like it was carried on the wind, and it wasn't any bird call Liam had ever heard before. Ava rolled her eyes. "There it is," she said with a smirk. "The famous whistle. I knew we'd hear it." Liam glanced at her. "It's nothing. Probably just some animal. We're fine." Mason, however, was pale, his eyes wide. "I don't like this. It's weird. Do you hear it? It's like it's calling us." Liam didn't respond. He was focused on the sound, his instincts sharp, trying to make sense of it. But the more he listened, the more uneasy he became. It wasn't just a random sound. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. It felt like it was watching them. They continued, but as the day wore on, the whistle grew louder, more insistent, and they began to feel like they were being pulled deeper into the forest. Liam's logical mind tried to dismiss it, just nerves, just their imagination, but the strange pull in the air was undeniable. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the whistle changed. It no longer sounded distant. It was right there, as if it was just behind them, just beyond their reach. Mason stopped in his tracks, his face pale. What is that? It's not normal. Ava frowned. It's probably just a bird or something. Liam, what do you think? Liam shook his head. I don't know, but something's off. We should turn back. Before they could move, the whistle came again, louder this time, unmistakably clear. And then, something else happened. The sound changed. It twisted into something Liam wasn't expecting. It started to mimic a voice. His mother's voice, calling out to him in the same way she used to when he was a child, calling him to come home. His blood ran cold. Ava, did you hear that? Liam whispered, his throat dry. Ava nodded, looking shaken for the first time. Yeah, but it's not possible. Then the voice changed again. This time, it was Mason's father, the man Mason hadn't seen in years, his voice pleading, begging for Mason to come closer. Mason's face contorted with fear. I need to go. I have to find him. No, Liam shouted, grabbing Mason's arm. It's not real. It's the whistle, trying to trick you. But Mason tore away from him, his eyes wide with desperation. No, you don't understand. It's him. It's my dad. Before Liam could stop him, Mason turned and sprinted into the woods toward the sound of his father's voice. Mason! Liam shouted, but it was no use. The whistle had him, pulling him further into the darkening woods. Liam and Ava followed, but they couldn't catch up. The trees seemed to shift, making it impossible to track Mason's path. The whistle echoed again, but this time it sounded like Ava's voice. Liam, help me. Please. Ava froze, her face a mask of fear. Did you hear that? It sounded like me. Liam nodded grimly. It's the whistle. It mimics voices. It tries to trick you. They ran harder, adrenaline coursing through their veins. But when they reached the spot where Mason had disappeared, they found only an empty clearing. No Mason, no signs of him, just the trees, thick and unmoving, and the faintest echo of the whistle. It sounded far away now, but it still lingered in the air like a heavy fog. Ava collapsed to her knees. He's gone. He's really gone. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He knew what was happening. The whistle didn't just lure people away, it consumed them, fed on their fear and their desires, trapping them in the forest, turning them into part of its twisted, ancient hunger. We need to leave, Liam said, pulling Ava up. Now. They tried to make their way back, but the forest was no longer familiar. The trees seemed alive, their trunks twisting and creaking, their branches reaching down like arms to grab them. Every step they took felt heavier, as if the very ground was trying to pull them under. The whistle was louder now, more urgent, as though the forest itself was closing in on them. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, night had fallen completely. The moonlight was dim, casting long, eerie shadows across the path. The whistle faded, but Liam knew it wasn't gone. It was just waiting. Ava was breathing hard, her face pale. We made it out, but... Liam turned to her, his voice low. You'll be hearing that whistle for the rest of your life. It doesn't let go that easily. Ava looked at him, her eyes wide with terror. What do you mean? Liam's eyes were distant. He couldn't explain it fully, not without sounding insane. But he knew the truth. The forest had claimed Mason, and now the whistle would follow them. Always. It would find a way to creep into their dreams, into their minds, until they couldn't tell what was real and what was part of the woods. And just as they reached their car, the whistle came again. Louder now, so close that Liam could almost feel the breath of the forest on his skin. It was calling to them, and no matter where they went, it would never stop. Story number 3. Jake Holloway used to be a big deal in the world of investigative journalism. He'd uncovered scandals, exposed corruption, and written stories that made people take notice. But lately, things had changed. His career had hit a dry spell. He was stuck in the kind of rut that made a man question his choices. So, when the tip came across his desk about an old apartment complex with a weird story behind it, Jake figured it was his chance to get back on track. The building was called Hillcrest Apartments, a decaying, crumbling place tucked in a forgotten corner of town. The kind of building no one talked about, but no one could really avoid either. It had a reputation, one that wasn't obvious on the surface. The tenants whispered at night, talking about a toothy grin that appeared under the stairs. A smile that was never there in the day but showed up after dark, stretching wide and unnatural like it was waiting for something or someone. A young girl named Chloe White had recently gone missing, her parents frantic, but there was little to go on. Chloe's disappearance seemed like just another case of a runaway kid, but the locals knew something wasn't right. They'd seen the smile. They'd heard the whispers. And now, Chloe was gone. Jake's instincts told him that this wasn't a simple missing persons case. Something was happening at Hillcrest, and he was determined to find out what. The building was old, more than 100 years old, with peeling paint and walls that groaned under the weight of years. Jake was greeted by Mr. Ramos, the janitor, who looked like he'd been working in that building for as long as the building itself had been standing. His graying hair and thick, calloused hands made him look like someone who had seen more than his fair share of darkness. "You here to write about the smile, huh?" Mr. Ramos asked, his voice rough as though he hadn't spoken to anyone in years. "A lot of people come by, but nobody stays long. You sure you want to dig into that?" Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the dim, musty hallways. "I'm just looking for the truth, Mr. Ramos." The old man stared at him for a long moment, then grunted. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. The building was built on bad ground. Bad ground, boy. You find out about the orphanage that used to be here?" Jake shook his head, but his curiosity was piqued. "What orphanage?" "Old place. Real dark history. Abuse, neglect. You know how it goes. A lot of kids died here, or disappeared. The foundation..." Mr. Ramos paused, his face going even grayer, as if he'd aged 10 years in the last 5 seconds. "The foundation's cursed. That smile? It's part of it. Not a ghost, not a demon. Something worse." Jake had heard his share of strange stories in his career, but this was different. This wasn't just a tale to sell papers. The fear in Mr. Ramos's voice was real. Later that night, Jake sat down with Chloe's mother, who was holding on to hope, even though she knew deep down her daughter might never come back. Chloe had been an artist, and she left behind a series of drawings before she disappeared. Most of them were simple sketches: flowers, the family dog, the sun. But there were others. Sketches of twisted, jagged shapes, of long, sharp teeth, and eyes that seemed to follow you wherever you looked. Jake studied one of them closely. In the background of the picture, there was a door, and beneath the door, a smile. It was the same smile that the tenants had been talking about. The smile under the stairs. Jake returned to Hillcrest that night. The building was quieter than usual, its shadows deepening with every step he took. He made his way to the basement, the area where the building's foundations had been built on the ruins of the orphanage. The stairs creaked beneath him as he descended, the air growing thicker with each step. He was about to reach the bottom when a sound stopped him cold. A low, almost imperceptible whistle. It was soft at first, like a breeze. Then it grew louder, sharper, until it became a voice. "Jake," the voice whispered. It sounded like a child's voice. "Jake, help me." His heart skipped a beat. The voice sounded like Chloe. He turned, searching the shadows for the source. There was nothing there, only the emptiness of the basement. And then he saw it. The smile. It wasn't just a shadow or a trick of the light. It was a real, twisted grin that seemed to stretch from wall to wall, wide and jagged, like it was made of bones. Not human bones, but something smaller. Something twisted. Jake stumbled back in horror as the smile grew, the edges of it curling like it was alive, hungry. He could feel something in the air, something thick, like it was feeding on the fear. He didn't know how long he stood there, frozen, but the smile kept getting bigger, the air heavier. Suddenly, the whisper returned. This time, it wasn't just Chloe's voice. It was a chorus of voices, a cacophony of children's laughter, whispers and cries, all blending together in a way that made Jake's skin crawl. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice said. This time, it wasn't Chloe. It was something deeper, older, and it came from the very walls of the building. "This place is ours. The children, they're always hungry." The walls of the basement seemed to pulse, and then the floor beneath Jake gave way. He didn't have time to react as he was pulled under, dragged into the dark, cold earth that had been soaked in the bones of the children who had died here. The last thing he heard before everything went black was the sound of that smile, the sickening, unnatural grin echoing through the walls. It was laughing. The next morning, the tenants found nothing but a broken, empty hallway. Jake was gone. His camera, his notebook, all the evidence he'd gathered were left behind. But they would never know what happened to him. In the weeks that followed, people started to hear it. The whispering, the laughter, the whisper of a smile beneath the stairs. They say if you listen close enough, you can hear Jake's voice still, calling out for help, trapped somewhere deep within the building, and the smile. It's still there too, watching, waiting. Story number 4. Ethan Vale wasn't the kind of guy who bought into ghost stories. He was a tech nerd, obsessed with gadgets, hacking, and anything that made the world around him tick. Urban mysteries were his thing, but only the ones that could be explained. But when he first heard it, he couldn't deny that something was off. It started about a month ago. Every night at exactly 2 a.m., an old dusty radio in the town's thrift shop would crackle to life, filling the room with ghostly, blood-curdling screams, the kind of screams that made your skin crawl and your heart race. For weeks, the townspeople tried to ignore it, chalking it up to a malfunctioning radio, an old relic from the past that had no place in the modern world. But Ethan couldn't ignore it. He was fascinated. Ethan spent the next few days researching the radio, trying to find anything that would explain the screams. The radio had been around since the early 50s, a model that was never meant to last more than a few years. Yet it still worked. In fact, it worked too well. Each night at exactly 2 a.m., it blared the same terrifying sound. The static would settle into a pattern, followed by high-pitched wails, then harsh, guttural screams that seemed to rip from the very air itself. There was nothing about it that made sense. "Maybe it's haunted," his best friend Isla Grant joked one night, as they sat in his room trying to decipher the mystery. Isla was a conspiracy theorist, always talking about the government, secret societies, and ancient curses. She was the kind of person who believed in the things most people didn't. Ethan smirked, tapping away at his laptop. Yeah, haunted by a busted circuit board. But Isla was persistent, and so was Ethan. After all, this was the kind of puzzle he loved. There had to be something to the story. The radio wasn't just malfunctioning, it was broadcasting something. But what? One night, after a particularly long session of listening to the station, Ethan discovered something strange. The screams weren't just random noises, they had a rhythm to them, a pattern hidden beneath the chaos. A series of distorted voices echoed through the static, almost as if they were trying to communicate. Ethan's heart raced as he ran the audio through a filter, isolating the voices. Help! We buried. The words were faint, but unmistakable. Someone, or something, was trying to reach them. The next night, Ethan decided to take things further. He hooked up the radio to his computer, using software that would allow him to track the signal. The radio's frequency was oddly stable, almost too stable for something that old. It was as if the radio had been tuned to broadcast something specific, something deliberate. Ethan fiddled with the settings, adjusting the frequencies. And that's when he heard it. The words, clearer now, and not just from the radio. Get out. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a malfunction anymore. The radio wasn't broken. It was broadcasting something deliberate, something alive. The scream came again, and this time the voice wasn't distorted. It was clear. I'm still here, buried under. The transmission cut out abruptly and Ethan sat frozen, his eyes wide. He turned to Isla, who had been sitting next to him the whole time. Her face was pale and she looked like she was about to say something when her phone buzzed. She checked the notification. It's the mayor, she said, her voice a little too shaky for Ethan's liking. There's a public announcement. He's saying we're all supposed to stay inside tonight, keep away from the square. Something about a storm coming in. Ethan stared at her, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. The mayor's warning was strange. Too strange. He had never done something like that before. The storm outside had only been light rain, nothing worth making a fuss about. But the mayor's message, though vague, had the same weight as an order. The next morning, Ethan and Isla couldn't resist. They had to know what was really going on. They headed to the town square. Ethan, with his usual curiosity, and Isla, with her always suspicious instincts. The square was empty, the streetlights flickering as if they were holding their breath. They approached the old town hall, the building where the mayor had his office. But something was wrong. The ground around the square was dug up, and the scent of fresh dirt was unmistakable. There were no construction workers, no machinery, just the exposed earth, the raw ground. Ethan's stomach dropped. There's something under here, Isla whispered. Without thinking, Ethan pulled out his phone and started recording. He didn't know what he was hoping to capture, but as he zoomed in on the disturbed earth, he saw it. A series of old, rotting bones. The remains of something long forgotten. That's a mass grave, Isla murmured, stepping back. The orphanage. I read about it in the archives. The one that burned down. The one no one talks about. Ethan's mind raced. The screams from the radio, the weird broadcast, the mayor's strange behavior. It all clicked together. This wasn't just an old radio. It was a beacon, summoning the souls trapped in the grave beneath the square. Souls that had never been allowed to rest. souls of children, buried in secret, their deaths covered up by the people in charge. The whom mayor knew. He had made a deal, keeping the truth buried, keeping the screams quiet in exchange for power. But the radio had started to break free from the control. It was calling out, and now it was getting stronger. Suddenly, the air grew cold. Ethan's phone flickered and the static returned, loud and blaring as if the radio itself had found them. The screams filled the air, louder than ever, a chorus of angry voices reaching out from the ground. The ground beneath them trembled. "Ethan!" Isla screamed, grabbing his arm. "We have to get out of here." But it was too late. A shadowy figure emerged from the earth, something impossibly tall, its face a twisted mass of bone and sinew, with hollow eyes and a mouth that stretched impossibly wide. It was the Grinner, the entity that had fed on the fear of those trapped beneath the square, and now it was free. The radio had opened the door, and the souls had come to claim what was theirs. Ethan tried to run, but something grabbed him, cold, sharp, like claws that dug into his skin. He screamed as the figure yanked him closer, its mouth gaping wide. The last thing he heard before he was pulled into the dark was the unmistakable sound of his own voice, distorted, echoing through the static. The radio in the thrift shop clicked off, and in its place, Ethan's voice crackled through the airwaves, screaming as the Grinner smiled, waiting for its next victim. The town went quiet. The mayor's deal had been sealed, and Ethan had become the new broadcaster of the dead. And every night at 2:00 a.m., the radio would hum to life again. Story number 5. Mason Thorne had never believed in things like urban legends. Not until he found himself standing at the bus stop at midnight, staring at the dark, empty street. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, a soft, gray drizzle. That seemed to pull the light out of the world. His jacket was soaked and his hands shook from the cold. Or maybe it was the grief. It had been 3 months since he lost her. His daughter, Ellie, the light of his life, taken too soon. The doctors had called it an accident, but Mason knew better. It wasn't an accident. Not really. It was his fault. He could have stopped her. He should have. The pain twisted inside him like a knife. Every night since her death, he had searched for a way to bring her back. He'd tried everything. Prayers, rituals, anything he could find to undo the nightmare that had become his life. But nothing worked. He was hollow now, a shell of the man he used to be. Tonight, though, tonight was different. He'd heard the stories, the whispers among the broken people in bars, in dark corners, the midnight bus, a blacked-out bus that only appeared to those who had lost all hope, who were desperate enough to want to leave the world behind. They said it traveled to places between life and death, to where decisions were made. Decisions that could rewrite a moment in time. But those who failed, they were trapped forever. Mason didn't care. He didn't care about the warnings. If there was even the slightest chance that he could see Ellie again, even if only for a moment, he'd take it. And so, he waited. At 12 a.m. on the dot, the bus appeared. It slid out of the darkness like it had always been there, its headlights casting long, eerie shadows on the pavement. The bus was black as night. The windows darkened so that no light. Aku escaped. Mason didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest, and boarded. Inside, the bus was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine. The air was thick with an unsettling chill, the seats empty except for a few lone figures. One of them, a tall man with a worn leather jacket and a face full of secrets, glanced up at Mason as he walked down the aisle. His eyes held something familiar. Regret, maybe, or perhaps a longing that Mason couldn't place. "Take a seat," the man rasped, nodding to an empty spot. "You're going to need it." Mason didn't argue. He sat down, his mind racing with questions he didn't want to ask. The bus jerked into motion, and as it did, the lights flickered and then went out entirely. The windows showed nothing but blackness. It was as though they were moving through a void. A low voice broke the silence. "Welcome aboard," it said, soft and almost musical. Mason turned and his breath caught in his throat. Standing at the front of the bus was a girl. Her hair was long, black, and tangled, and her face was pale, almost translucent. She wore a dark uniform, the kind that looked like it belonged in a funeral home. The girl's eyes, though, those eyes, they were Ellie's. The same eyes that used to light up when she smiled. Eyes that had been buried with her. "Ellie," Mason whispered, his throat tight. The girl smiled, but it wasn't Ellie's smile. It was something darker. "I'm the conductor," she said. Her voice echoed in Mason's mind like a haunting memory. "You've come for a reason." Mason's heart shattered. "I didn't mean it. I couldn't save you. You don't get to rewrite the past, Mason," she interrupted, her voice cold and distant now. "But you do get a chance. A chance to change one moment, one choice. Fail, and you stay with us." Mason's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" The girl, his daughter's ghost, or whatever she was, nodded toward the other passengers, and Mason's eyes flicked over to them. The first man, the one with the leather jacket, had his face buried in his hands, and from his shaking shoulders, Mason knew the man was crying. The second was a girl, no older than 17, her face hollow with fear. She sat still, staring out the window as if she were looking at something just beyond reach. "All of us are here for one reason," the conductor said. "We've all lost something, but none of us can change our fate unless we make a choice. You, Mason, have one chance, one moment to change." The bus lurched again, and a faint light appeared at the end of the road ahead, though Mason could barely see through the thick fog now clouding the windows. The air seemed to thicken, growing heavy with the weight of 1,000 lost souls. The girl, his daughter, stepped closer to him. "It's time," she whispered. "You can change it. Your moment. The one where everything fell apart." Mason's hands trembled as he closed his eyes. He could hear the faint echo of Ellie's laugh, the sound of her footsteps running through the house, the smell of her favorite perfume. He could feel her presence, just beyond his reach. "One moment," he muttered to himself. "I can fix it. I'll fix it." The memories came flooding back. The car, the rain, the way Ellie had been so excited to leave, the argument he had with her before she walked out the door. He had yelled at her. He had been too angry, too distracted, but now, here it was. He had a chance to stop her, to tell her to stay, to make sure she was safe. He could reach out, pull her back. But as Mason stood, he saw the faces of the other passengers, each one twisted by guilt and sorrow. Isla, the runaway teen, stared at him with hollow eyes. Leo, the elderly man, looked up with a tear-streaked face. They all had their own moments, their own choices they had failed to make. The bus grew darker, and the fog outside thickened. "You can't save everyone, Mason," Isla whispered, her voice trembling with something darker than fear. "We're all stuck here, and if you fail, if you can't change it." Mason knew what she meant. He had one chance, and if he didn't act, he would be trapped here like the others. The thought of staying in this endless loop, bound to the darkness, was more than he could bear. As the bus drew nearer to its destination, the conductor, Ellie's ghost, whispered, "Choose wisely, Daddy. One choice, one moment. Change it, or you stay. Forever." Mason's hands clenched into fists. He looked out the window, at the light shining ahead, at the moment that could save him. And maybe save Ellie. But then he looked back at the other passengers, at the grief and regret in their eyes. And something in him broke. "I can't leave you," Mason said, his voice hoarse. "I won't let anyone else be trapped here." He chose to stay, not for him, not for Ellie, but for them. For the lost souls still caught between life and death, still waiting for their chance to make things right. The bus slowed, and the lights outside flickered out. The passengers' faces went blank, and for the first time, the conductor, Ellie's ghost, smiled. As Mason's body dissolved into the mist, he understood. The midnight bus didn't just take you to nowhere. It took you to a place where time never moved forward, where choices were made, and where some souls were never allowed to rest. And Mason would be there forever, driving the bus, making sure the lost souls had their chance to make things right. He had become part of the journey. Story number 6. Noah Ashford had always thought the village superstitions were ridiculous. Life in the small remote village of Hawthorne wasn't anything like the stories his grandmother used to tell, but it didn't matter much to Noah. He wasn't the kind of guy to believe in curses or demons. In fact, Noah spent most of his time rolling his eyes at the strange rituals that the villagers held dear, especially the one concerning St. Bridget's. Church. There was only one rule there: never let the last candle burn out. It sounded silly, didn't it? A candle, of all things. People whispered that if the candle ever went out, something terrible would happen. But Noah didn't buy into it. He had no time for old wives' tales or the shadowy stories the villagers loved to repeat. It was just a stupid superstition, right? But on one cold winter evening, everything changed. Noah was walking past the church when he noticed the flickering light inside. The church was always locked after dark, but the candle inside the window still burned bright. He had seen it burn every day, day after day. The ritual had become so normal to him that he didn't even think about it anymore. But tonight, something felt different. The candle, still burning, seemed to flicker just a little too much. He was curious, something inside him urging him to go inside. It wasn't like Noah to listen to his curiosity, but tonight, something pulled at him. The door creaked open easily, the scent of old wood and incense filling the air. The candle on the altar stood at the center of the church, surrounded by dusty pews and cracked stained glass windows. The flame was weak now, trembling in its final moments. That's when Noah saw Father Gideon standing in the corner, his back to him. The priest didn't move, just stood there in silence. "Father," Noah called. The priest turned, his eyes cold and distant. "What are you doing here, Noah?" I just wanted to see the candle." Noah wasn't sure why he felt compelled to say it, but there was something in Father Gideon's eyes that made him uneasy. Father Gideon's lips curled slightly. "You should leave. The candle is about to burn out." Noah felt his pulse quicken. The candle was about to die. and he couldn't help but watch as the last ember flickered one final time before it vanished into darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. But then the temperature in the church dropped. The air grew heavy, suffocating. The walls seemed to close in. A deep, low rumble echoed from the stone floors, and Noah's eyes went wide as the shadows began to shift. Father Gideon's face twisted into something not human. His features stretched, his skin rippling with unnatural movements. The church was alive with a horrible, crackling sound. Something was waking up. And then it came. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form burning with orange-red fire, its face a twisted mask of hatred and suffering. It had no eyes, only glowing embers where its gaze should be. The air around it shimmered with heat, the smell of smoke filling the room. "The Ember Wraith," Father Gideon whispered. Noah's stomach churned. He had heard the name before. The village legend. The demon bound by the last candle. "You," Noah stammered. "You're the reason. You're the one who—" Father Gideon's lips curled into a smile, but it was not the smile of a man. "The candle kept it bound for centuries," he said softly. "And now, it's free." The wraith's voice was like crackling fire, a low, guttural growl. "You freed me." The heat intensified, and Noah stumbled backward, his heart hammering in his chest. Before Noah could react, the wraith lunged, the air around him scorching. With a heat so intense, it almost felt like he was being burned alive. The demon reached out, its hand like a blade of flame, its fingers stretching toward him. But then, the wraith paused. Its eyes flickered over to the priest, Father Gideon. "You knew this would happen," Noah spat. "You—" Father Gideon didn't answer, his face grim. "Each person in this village carries a sin, a secret. They are the ones who have kept the wraith at bay all these years. But now, their secrets will come to light." Noah's blood ran cold as the wraith moved closer to the pews. He followed its gaze, and then he saw it. The village. He saw the faces of the people who lived there, their lives flashing through his mind. Each of them had a dark secret. The mayor, the baker, the school teacher, all of them had hidden sins they had carried for years. And the wraith, it would find them. One by one, it would burn them all. "No!" Noah shouted. "This is all my fault. I didn't know. I didn't mean for this to happen." Father Gideon stepped forward. The moment the last candle burned out, it was already too late for all of us. The wraith's fiery fingers reached out to touch the first villager it saw. The flames consumed them in an instant, reducing them to nothing more than ash. The wraith let out a blood-curdling screech as the fire engulfed the first victim, the town's first sinner. Noah backed away, his heart racing. I have to stop this," he whispered. He ran to the altar, his mind frantic. He knew what he had to do. He grabbed the last candle that sat there, the one that had burned so long, and struck a match. But the wraith's voice stopped him. "You can't stop what has already begun." Noah lit the candle, its flame flickering weakly, just like the one that had died before. The fire seemed small, insignificant, but it burned with purpose. And then, a horrible realization hit Noah. The only way to keep the wraith from consuming the entire village, from burning it all down, was to offer something. His life. Noah turned to Father Gideon, his voice cracking. "You can't let it destroy everything." Father Gideon's expression softened, just a little. "It's the only way, Noah. The candle must never go out." With trembling hands, Noah held the flame to his skin, his heart pounding as the fire touched his flesh. The pain was unbearable. His body shook as the candle's flame began to consume him, his soul feeding the flame, the demon. But it wasn't just the demon. It was the village too. Noah's final scream was lost in the crackle of the fire, and when it was over, he was gone. The wraith paused, its ember eyes flickering as if understanding the sacrifice. It turned, its focus now on the village, and Noah's last breath was carried away on the wind. Father Gideon stood over the altar, his face unreadable as the flame from Noah's life burned steady, holding back the demon for now. But Noah's sacrifice wasn't a victory. It was just another part of the endless cycle. The wraith was bound again, for now, and the last candle in the church would never burn out again. Story number 7. Jake Holloway had seen a lot of things in his years as a detective. Murders, missing persons, dark secrets. He'd uncovered them all. But there was one thing he didn't believe in: ghost stories. That's why, when the first death was reported, he rolled his eyes at the whispers from the townsfolk. It was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the kind where rumors had a way of spiraling into legends. The most persistent of those legends was about the woman in the red raincoat, a ghostly figure who appeared during thunderstorms. The story went that if she touched you, you'd die within a week, drowned in your own home, with no water in sight. Just a body, cold and lifeless, as if the water had come from inside you. Jake had heard the story 1,000 times, and every time, he dismissed it. He'd grown up in this town, and he knew the people. But when the first body showed up, an old man named George Fletcher, found in his living room with his eyes wide open, hands gripping his throat, Jake couldn't ignore it. The second body came 3 days later, a middle-aged woman found in her kitchen. The same strange signs, no water, just a body that looked like it had drowned. And then a third death followed. That's when Emily Crow, a rookie cop and the first person in the department to actually believe the legend, came to Jake with the theory. "It's her, Jake," Emily said, her voice tight with anxiety. "The woman in the red raincoat. I know it sounds crazy, but they all died after the storm and they all said they saw her before they died." Jake had to admit, there was something unsettling about the deaths. Too many similarities. But he didn't buy the legend. He couldn't. Not after all these years of solving real crimes. "It's just coincidence, Emily. People die in storms. Bad things happen when the weather gets violent." But Emily wasn't convinced. Then why is it only these people? Why are they all connected to the flood? Flood. Jake's stomach tightened. He'd heard the story too. It was an event that had happened when he was a kid, something his mind had always pushed aside. The town had been devastated by a massive flood years ago, the kind that changed the landscape forever. People had died in that flood, but the town, led by Mayor Carlton, had covered it up. Only a handful of bodies had been officially found. The rest, they'd been swept away in the storm, lost in the wreckage, and never spoken of again. "I'm telling you, Jake," Emily continued, "the legend isn't just a story. It's real. I think the woman, she's one of the people who died in that flood. And now she's coming back for the ones who covered it up. Jake felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The storm, the drowning deaths, it was too much like the flood. But he didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to believe that there was something supernatural at work. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. His mind kept racing back to the flood, the bodies that were never found, the things he'd seen in his childhood, things he had tried to forget. He remembered the way his parents had acted, the way the town had acted, like they were trying to bury something deeper than just the bodies of the drowned. But there were some things you couldn't bury, not for long. The next morning, Jake went to the mayor's office, determined to get some answers. Mayor Carlton had been in charge back then, and if anyone knew about the flood's secrets, it was him. Carlton's office was dimly lit, the smell of old wood and cigarette smoke hanging in the air. The mayor was sitting behind his desk, his face as puffy and bloated as always, his tie askew. When he saw Jake, he immediately put down his pen and stood up. "Jake," he said, his voice hoarse, "what can I do for you?" Jake didn't beat around the bush. "I know what happened during the flood, Carlton. The bodies you covered up, people who died and were never reported." Carlton's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Jake leaned forward, his voice low. "You're lying. I was a kid then. I remember seeing things, hearing things. You covered it up, and now people are dying, drowning, just like they did in that flood. And I think you know who's responsible." Carlton's eyes flickered nervously, but he quickly regained his composure. "That's just an old story, Jake. There's nothing to it. The flood happened. We did what we had to do." Jake could see the guilt in Carlton's eyes. He wasn't fooling anyone. "I know the legend. I know about the woman in the red raincoat. She's coming for the people who kept quiet about the flood. She's coming for you." The mayor's face turned red, and he slammed his fist on the desk. "You don't know anything. This town has been through enough." Before Jake could respond, a crash echoed from the hallway. Emily rushed in breathless, her eyes wide with terror. "Jake, it's happening again. Someone's dead." Jake felt a pit form in his stomach. "Who?" "Mrs. Jacobs," Emily said. "She's dead, just like the others. And I saw her, before she died. I saw her, the woman in the red raincoat." Jake's heart sank. This was it. The curse was real. And now it was coming for him, too. They rushed to Mrs. Jacobs' house. When they arrived, the storm had started up again, the rain pouring down in sheets. The house was eerily silent, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Inside, they found Mrs. Jacobs lying on her kitchen floor, her eyes wide open, her hands clutching her throat. No water anywhere, but the air felt heavy, like something was pressing down on them. As they stood there staring at the body, the door slammed shut behind them. And then, from the corner of the room, they heard a soft, scraping sound, the rustling of fabric. Noah's blood ran cold. He turned, and there she was, the woman in the red raincoat. She stood in the doorway, her face obscured by the hood of the raincoat, but Jake could see the faint glow of her pale, hollow face, the flicker of firelight in her eyes. She was coming closer. "No!" Jake shouted. "Stay away!" But it was no use. The moment she touched him, his skin began to burn, as if the storm itself had come alive and set him on fire. His vision blurred, and he felt the cold grip of death closing in. The woman in the red raincoat had touched him, and now he would die. But in that moment, as the cold spread through his body, something inside Jake snapped. He knew what he had to do. He had to break the curse, or the town would be lost. With the last of his strength, Jake grabbed the woman's wrist and pulled her close. His voice was barely a whisper. "Take me instead. Leave them alone." The woman in the red raincoat's eyes flared with recognition, and Jake knew, with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, that this had been his destiny all along. She let go, and as the storm raged outside, Jake Holloway died, sacrificing himself to end the curse. The rain finally stopped. The woman in the red raincoat faded away, and the town, for the first time in decades, could breathe easy. The legend, the curse, had been broken, but the town would always remember Jake Holloway, the man who gave everything to stop the storm, the man who broke the curse and saved them all. Story number 8. Ethan. Rivers had never been afraid of the dark. He'd spent his childhood exploring the woods behind his house, venturing deep into the forest where the trees grew so thick that the sun never quite reached the ground. The dark was just another part of the world, but the drains, those were something else. It started with the drought. The summer had been brutal. Weeks of hot, dry weather that had left the earth cracked and parched. The town's water supply was running low, and everyone complained about the heat. But then something strange happened. The old, forgotten sewer system beneath the neighborhood began to show itself. Cracked pipes and long hidden tunnels emerging from the ground like skeletons from the dirt. The kids in the neighborhood were drawn to the exposed pipes, the smell of stagnant water still thick in the air. They poked around the holes, curious, daring each other to get closer to the drains. At first, it was just a whisper, a faint sound, like wind blowing through the pipes. But then it grew. The whispers turned into voices, low, pleading, like children, begging for help. And the more the kids listened, the closer they got to the pipes, inching toward the sound. Ethan's younger brother, Ben, had always been adventurous. He was the kind of kid who didn't hesitate to do something daring. Ethan had tried to warn him, don't get too close to the drains, don't listen to the voices. But Ben was stubborn. "It's just the wind, Ethan," he said, shrugging. "Nothing to worry about." But Ethan had felt something, deep in his gut. The voices didn't sound like wind. They were real. He'd watched Ben get closer to the drain at the corner of the street, leaning in, trying to hear better. Then, one day, Ben didn't come home. Ethan's heart sank when he found out. His parents were frantic. The whole neighborhood was searching. They called the police, but no one could find Ben. Ethan didn't need to be told. He knew exactly where his brother had gone. The whispers had gotten to him. Ben had followed them. Ethan wasn't going to sit around waiting for someone else to solve this. He knew the area around the drains like the back of his hand, but the more he thought about it, the more unsettled he became. There was something about the sewer system, something old, something that had been buried for a reason. He needed help. Chloe, his childhood friend and the smartest person he knew, was the first person he turned to. She was the kind of person who could decipher old maps and blueprints like they were nothing. She'd helped Ethan with problems before, and she didn't hesitate to jump into the mystery. Together, they dug through the old town records, searching for any hint of what could have happened to Ben, and to anyone else who might have gone missing in the past. That's when they found it. Hidden in a stack of ancient blueprints was something strange. Beneath the town, under the old sewers, there was a forgotten underground chamber, marked only with strange symbols, none of which Chloe could recognize. But one thing was clear. The room was deep beneath the main drains, and it wasn't part of any regular sewer system. They had to go down there. Ethan and Chloe found a way into the tunnels, their flashlights cutting through the dark, cold passageways. The sound of rushing water echoed around them as they made their way deeper into the sewer system, following the path that Ethan knew would lead them to Ben. The voices were louder now, more desperate. They were no longer just whispers. They were clear, as if the voices were right next to him. But the closer they got, the more the air seemed to thicken. The walls of the tunnel seemed to pulse like something alive. Ethan could feel his skin crawl, but he pressed forward. He had to find Ben. Finally, they reached the chamber. The door, or what used to be a door, was a massive stone slab, worn by time and years of neglect. As Ethan pushed it open, the smell hit him first. Decay, rot, something that had been buried for centuries. The room was dimly lit by strange flickering torches stuck in the walls. The air was thick with the scent of something ancient. And there, in the center of the room, was Ben. But he wasn't the same. His skin was pale, his eyes wide open, but there was no recognition in them. His body was twisted, his limbs unnaturally still. He stood there, unmoving, as if frozen in time. But Ethan knew, deep in his heart, that Ben wasn't just standing still. He was waiting. Before Ethan could call out to him, Chloe's flashlight caught something on the floor. It was a symbol, carved into the stone, an intricate pattern that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Chloe stepped forward to examine it, her fingers tracing the lines. "They sacrificed children here," she said, her voice trembling, "to a water god. The whispers, the voices, they're the spirits of those who were taken. The cult, it's an ancient one. They used the drains to call. The sacrifices." Ethan froze. The whispers around him seemed to grow louder, as if the walls themselves were closing in. He realized with horror that Ben hadn't just gone missing. He had been chosen. The voices had lured him here. The drain caller, the parasitic god of water and sacrifice, was feeding on the souls of those lost to the town's history. The children who had disappeared over the years, their spirits trapped in the drains, luring others in to take their place. Ben wasn't dead. Not really. But he wasn't alive either. He had been transformed, claimed by the drain caller. Ethan stepped forward, his hand outstretched toward his brother. But before he could reach him, a low growl echoed from the walls. The drain caller was awakening, and it was hungry. Ethan's heart raced. The voices were screaming now, loud and painful. He turned to Chloe, panic rising. "We have to get him out of here. We have to stop this." But it was too late. Ben's eyes turned toward Ethan, and in that moment, Ethan knew his brother was lost to the god beneath the earth. In a desperate, final act, Ethan grabbed a nearby pipe, swinging it against the wall. Sparks flew, and the earth trembled. The drain caller screamed, a deafening, bone-shaking cry that echoed through the tunnels. Ethan knew what he had to do. He turned to Chloe, his eyes filled with tears, and whispered, "Seal the drains. Don't let anyone else get taken." Chloe nodded, her face pale with fear. Together, they worked quickly, sealing the entrance to the chamber with debris and old stones. It wouldn't stop the drain caller forever, but it would buy the town time. As the last stone fell into place, Ethan turned toward his brother one last time. Ben's face had softened, his eyes almost human again, but just for a moment. Then the darkness returned, and Ethan knew his brother was gone. He sealed the last drain forever, the weight of his sacrifice heavy in his heart. Ben was lost, but no one else would fall victim to the drain caller. Not on his watch. And as Ethan walked away from the darkness, he knew he had done the only thing he could do: sacrifice his brother's memory to stop the echoes from the drain. Story number 9. Sophia Vale had made a name for herself chasing ghost stories and paranormal mysteries. Her podcast, Nightmares Uncovered, had gained a modest following, but she was always searching for the next big thing, the story that would push her into the spotlight. Something viral, something unforgettable. She found it one night in a small town, nestled at the edge of a forgotten stretch of back roads where the locals whispered about a man with a lantern. The story was simple enough. Travelers reported seeing a man, always at night, holding an oil lantern. His face was pale, his smile impossibly wide, stretching too far, like something that didn't belong. He would offer directions, help the lost find their way, but those who accepted the offer disappeared. No one had ever come back. Sophia was intrigued. The story had potential, but it wasn't the ghostly tale she was looking for. It was something darker, more sinister. A man who lured people in with his smile, only to take them somewhere they could never return from? That was a story she could sink her teeth into. She hit the road, recording her thoughts for the podcast as she drove. The small town of Havenfield was her destination. It wasn't far from where the reports of the Lantern Man had started. Locals called it Briar's Hollow Road, an old winding path that twisted through the woods like something out of a nightmare. Sophia's excitement was palpable, but she knew this wouldn't be easy. After all, it wasn't just any tale. People had gone missing. Her first stop was the local diner, where she met Liam Crow, a young man who had barely escaped an encounter with the Lantern Man. His eyes were still wide with fear, and his hands trembled as he described the event. "It was a few months ago," Liam said, looking around as if the walls themselves might be listening. "I was driving home late, just trying to get back to the city. I took Briar's Hollow because it's a shortcut. I didn't see him at first, but then I saw the lantern light flickering through the trees. I thought it was a car, maybe. Someone needing help." Sophia leaned in, her voice low. "What happened?" Liam swallowed hard. He just appeared, standing in the middle of the road, holding that damn lantern. His smile was wrong, too wide, like it wasn't part of him. I tried to drive around him, but the car wouldn't start. It felt like the road didn't want me to leave. He told me to roll down the window. He said he could help me with directions, but the moment I rolled down the window, I felt it. Something cold, like he wasn't human. "Did you talk to him?" Sophia asked. Liam nodded, his voice quivering. "I didn't have much choice. I had to. But the more I looked at him, the less he looked like a man. The more he looked like something else." His eyes dropped to the table and his voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm telling you, Sophia. He wanted me to accept his directions. He wanted me to stay. I don't know how, but I knew if I did, I wouldn't have made it out. I drove away so fast and the car started up like nothing ever happened. But I still hear him sometimes. The smile, the lantern. I don't think I'll ever be free of him." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. This was it, the story she had been waiting for. But there were more questions. more layers to uncover. The Lantern Man wasn't just some lost spirit. There was something deeper to his presence, something ancient. The next day, Sophia met Officer Harlan, a local cop who had seen the toll Briar's Hollow had taken on the town. He didn't want to talk at first, but after some gentle prodding and a few well-placed questions, he finally relented. "There's a deal between the man and the land itself," Officer Harlan said, his voice tight. "The Lantern Man, or whatever he is now, is a spirit bound to that road. The deal was made a long time ago when the road was first carved out. A blood pact, one that calls for sacrifices, souls to pay for the freedom of a spirit trapped there." Sophia listened intently, her pulse quickening. "Sacrifices? What do you mean?" Harlan's face was grim. "The people who disappear? They're not just lost. They're offered, bartered souls. The Lantern Man doesn't take them for himself. He takes them to keep the deal alive. He's bound to that road, and those souls are his payment for a chance at freedom. But he's never gotten it. He's just been collecting souls for God knows how long. And you know this because," Sophia asked. "Because," Officer Harlan said quietly, "my father made that deal. He was the one who cut the bargain, the one who started it all. He's the one who cursed this road." Sophia's stomach twisted. "You're saying you're part of this?" Harlan's eyes met hers, and in that moment, she saw the weight of the past in them. "I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. But there's no breaking it. You can't just go around making deals with forces like that. They take more than you expect. My father tried to escape once, and then the Lantern Man came for him. Took him. That was years ago. I'm the last one left who knows." It hit Sophia like a punch to the gut. She realized then, this wasn't just some urban legend. The Lantern Man had a purpose. He wasn't just an entity wandering the roads for fun. He was fulfilling an ancient pact, one that had roots deep in the town's history, and it wasn't going to stop until his debt was paid. That night, Sophia followed the trail, using the recordings from her podcast to guide her. The road was eerily quiet, the trees pressing in from both sides, casting long shadows on the pavement. And then, like a beacon in the dark, she saw it. A faint light swinging back and forth in the distance. The lantern. Sophia's heart pounded as she drew closer, the image of the Lantern Man growing clearer with every step. There he was, standing in the middle of the road, his wide smile stretching impossibly far across his face. He raised the lantern, and the light flickered in the wind. "Lost, are we?" the Lantern Man asked, his voice a low, unsettling murmur. His eyes gleamed with something ancient, something beyond understanding. Sophia stood there, rooted to the spot, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't know what to say, but something inside her screamed to turn around, to run. But she couldn't. She had to know the truth. "You're looking for the next soul," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What happens if no one takes the offer?" The Lantern Man's smile widened. "I have no choice but to take whoever crosses this road. It is the pact. The land demands it, and I am bound." Sophia swallowed hard, her mind racing. She knew what had to be done. The innocent traveler, the one who would fall victim next, it had to be stopped. Without thinking, she stepped forward, reaching out. "Take me instead," she said, her voice shaking with fear, but determined. "Take me. I'll take his place." The lantern man paused, his smile faltering for the briefest moment. He didn't speak, just stepped forward, the weight of centuries, pressing down on him. And then the deal was made. The last thing Sophia remembered before everything went dark was the coldness of the lantern's light. And then she was gone. The next morning, the road was quiet again. Briar's Hollow was still cursed, but Sophia's name was now on the list, her soul a part of the bargain that would keep the lantern man bound to the road forever. And somewhere, in the distance, her voice echoed, still part of the road, still part of the pact. Story number 10. Chloe Winters had always been drawn to the strange, the eerie, the things that sent a chill down your spine. Growing up in the small town of Ashbrook, there were plenty of ghost stories. Some were just drunken tales told around campfires, but others felt real. Every year, like clockwork, she'd hear about the same mysterious event, the Dead Man's Crosswalk. It was always the same night, the same time, midnight on Halloween. The crosswalk at the corner of Pine Street and Main would become deadly. Cars swerved, crashing into one another even when there was no one walking, even when there were no pedestrians at all. The accidents were never explained. There were no victims, no witnesses, just mangled metal and broken glass. The cops couldn't figure it out. It was always brushed off as bad luck, a strange coincidence. But Chloe knew better. Her mom, a local librarian, would always say, "Some stories are meant to stay buried." But Chloe wasn't the type to leave things buried. She had an empathic ability to feel emotions, to sense when things were wrong, and the stories surrounding that crosswalk felt like an open wound that wouldn't heal. One night, after months of digging through old newspapers and asking around town, Chloe found a story that had been buried for decades. A hit and run. A man named Thomas Wheeler had been struck by a car at that exact spot on Halloween night, 30 years ago. He'd been left to die, his body found by a local teen who had been walking home. The driver was never caught. Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that the man's spirit was tied to that road, to the crosswalk, seeking revenge on those who never took responsibility. With Halloween approaching, Chloe was determined to uncover the truth. She convinced her best friend Jamie to come with her that night. Jamie, always the voice of reason, wasn't sure about it. "Chloe, this is crazy. Ghosts, spirits, accidents. It's all just stories. Why are you so obsessed with it?" Chloe shrugged, her eyes focused on the path ahead. "Because it feels real, Jamie. There's something in the air, something waiting to be discovered. I can feel it." As midnight approached, the air grew thick with tension. They stood by the crosswalk, waiting for the moment when the accidents were supposed to happen. The street lights flickered and the wind picked up, swirling leaves around their feet. Chloe could feel the cold presence of something watching them, something lingering in the dark corners of the road. And then, just as the clock struck midnight, it happened. A car sped down Pine Street, and Chloe's heart skipped a beat as it swerved violently, veering off the road and crashing into the nearby fence. But there was no one in the street. No one was walking. No one had crossed the road. It was as if the car had hit an invisible force. Jamie gasped, pulling Chloe back. "We need to get out of here, Chloe. This is insane." But Chloe stood frozen, staring at the wreckage. And that's when she saw it. A shadow, standing at the edge of the crosswalk. A figure, pale and gaunt with eyes hollow and wide, staring right at her. It was Thomas Wheeler. The ghost's eyes locked onto hers, and Chloe's heart raced. She felt the weight of his sadness, his anger, his betrayal. The ghost didn't speak, but his message was clear. He was looking for something. Someone. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. "Jamie, Her voice faltered. "I think I know who he's after." Jamie turned, confused. "What are you talking about?" But Chloe was already moving. She turned and ran down the street, the ghost's presence following her like a cold shadow. At home, Chloe couldn't shake the image of Thomas Wheeler's face, the hollow eyes, the rage, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. She sat in her room, her mind racing, and that's when it hit her. The truth that she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Her father, Mr. Winters, had been the one who'd caused Thomas Wheeler's death. Chloe remembered the stories her dad had told her, how he'd been a young man at the time, driving home after a party. He'd never told her the details, but Chloe had always known there was something in his past that haunted him, something he was afraid to talk about. She sat on the edge of her bed, her phone trembling in her hand. She called her dad's work number, but it went to voicemail. She called his cell, but it went unanswered. She needed to talk to him. She needed to confront him. Finally, she stood up, her feet cold against the wooden floor. She walked into the living room where her father was sitting in his chair watching TV. His face was pale and his eyes were distant. "Dad," Chloe began, her voice shaking. "I need to know something. You were the driver, weren't you? The night Thomas Wheeler died?" Her father froze. The air in the room seemed to thicken. He slowly turned to her, his face unreadable. His voice, when it came, was a low whisper. "I didn't mean to, Chloe. I didn't mean to kill him. It was an accident. I panicked and I ran." Chloe's heart sank. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone?" He looked down, his hands gripping the arms of the chair tightly. "Because I was scared. I was just a kid. I didn't know what to do. And then I felt something, like something was watching me. The night Thomas Wheeler died, I felt it, that thing. It was like the road itself was angry, and I was the one who had to pay for it." Chloe stepped back, her eyes wide. "You made a deal with it, didn't you? You didn't just run, Dad. You made a deal to cover it up. You thought you could escape, but the ghost was coming for you all this time." Mr. Winters didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Chloe's mind raced. The pieces fit together. The accidents, the spirit haunting the road. And now, it was all coming to a head. The ghost wasn't just seeking revenge, it was trying to draw the driver out. It had been waiting for the moment when the truth would finally come to light. The doorbell rang, interrupting the silence. Chloe's father stood up slowly, his face pale. He didn't want to answer, but Chloe knew it was too late. The ghost was here. It was coming for him. Chloe ran to the door and opened it, but there was no one there, only the sound of the wind howling through the trees. She turned to her father, her heart pounding. She didn't know what to do, but she knew this. She couldn't let him pay for what he'd done. Her father stepped forward, his face drawn in. Despair. "Chloe, I've done everything I can to make it right, but I know it won't be enough. The ghost, the curse, it's too much." Chloe grabbed his arm, her voice trembling. "Dad, please, don't let him take you." But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind them, and in that instant, The ghost of Thomas Wheeler appeared at the threshold, his hollow eyes locking onto Chloe's father. The smile on the ghost's face was wide and terrifying. "No, Dad!" Chloe screamed, but it was no use. The ghost reached out, touching her father's chest. His body went rigid, his eyes wide with terror, but the ghost didn't stop. Chloe's father let out a final, anguished scream as the ghost took him, dragging him into the darkness, into the very road that had claimed Thomas Wheeler's life. And as the door closed, Chloe fell to her knees, knowing there was nothing left but the echoes of the past and the curse of the dead man's crosswalk. Her father had confessed, but it wasn't enough. The ghost had claimed him anyway. Like horror that chills your spine and hits your heart? Hit subscribe, drop a comment if you've ever heard of a haunted road, and share this with someone who loves urban legends. Trust me, you don't want to drive through this one alone.